Have you ever wondered, what would happen if you simply chose to step away? Not as an escape, and not by disappearing physically, but by distancing yourself quietly, calmly, untying those invisible strings that connect you to others without your permission and without their awareness. Picture an ordinary morning. Same bed, same ceiling, same familiar light, same routine you repeat every single day. But inside you, there's only one sentence. Enough. I want to return to myself. No hate, no thirst for revenge, no dramatic gesture begging to be understood. Just an honest need to be with yourself, with no demands, no expectations, and no roles weighing on your shoulders. The roles you wore for so long that you forgot your own face beneath them. And here, the disturbance begins. Not within you, but within them. Because the distance you create now is not a physical distance. It is a distance of awareness and sovereignty. One single step back is enough to expose what was hidden, to reveal what closeness once concealed. At that moment, an uncomfortable truth surfaces, a truth nobody likes to admit. People, in most relationships, do not see you as you are. They see what they need you to be. They mold you to fit the shape of their emptiness. They put their masks on you, then call it love, loyalty, or something they can't live without. And the tighter that mold begins to feel on your soul, the harder they press it, just so the cracks beneath never show. And when you step away, the real pain they feel isn't because you are no longer present, but because the image they built of you begins to crumble. Distance creates empty space, and empty space is dangerous, because it doesn't reveal what they lost from you. It reveals what they never built within themselves. Then comes the question they cannot voice, but it screams inside them. Who am I, if this person is no longer here the way they were? Did they ever truly see you as a human being? Or were you only a mirror reflecting what they wanted to see? Did they love you? Or did they love the feeling you gave them without realizing it? Distance is not a test of your strength. It is a test of the relationship itself. It exposes, with terrifying speed, who was connected to you in awareness, and who was clinging to you out of fear, who respected your presence, and who was consuming it. And with that first space you create, the responses change. Some suddenly glorify you, because admiration is easier than facing their own emptiness. Others accuse you of selfishness, because blaming you is easier than admitting their dependency. And only a rare few, a very rare few, will go silent and examine themselves instead of chasing your shadow. But everything you've seen so far is just the surface. The deeper question hasn't even begun. What truly happens inside them, emotionally and psychologically, right after you step away? When you step away, something strange begins to happen inside them. At first, they refuse to acknowledge what they feel. They don't say, "My world just shook." They say, "It's fine. It's nothing." They'll come back. They always do. This is the first stage of denial, a gentle denial, the kind that feels calm on the surface, just like the quiet that comes before a storm. And because the mind refuses to face the truth, it begins creating emergency narratives, fast stories to avoid admitting a painful reality. Your presence was not a detail in their life. It was a pillar. Then comes confusion, a silent confusion that eats away at their stability, little by little. They start asking questions they're not ready to answer. Did I do something wrong? Why did they leave? When did things change? Is it me? Is it them? Yet, at the same time, in the same breath, they reject the answers. Because any honest answer would expose their deepest vulnerability. Human beings don't collapse the moment they lose control. Instead, they try first to pull you back psychologically. Without approaching you physically, they watch you from a distance. They observe your silence. They send invisible messages through tiny actions. Outwardly, they act unbothered. But inside, every emotion screams dependence. Then fear arrives. Not fear of losing you as a person, but fear of losing the role you played in their life. Not fear of your absence, but fear of facing themselves without the shelter you unknowingly provided. And suddenly, fear transforms into an urge to control. They might provoke you. They might emotionally pull on you. They might try to guilt trip you. They might push you to doubt your decision. Not because they truly need you, but because they desperately need to stop the internal earthquake you triggered. They are not fighting for you. They are fighting to protect the identity they built around you. They fear the emptiness that rises in your absence. Because that emptiness reveals a brutal truth. How much they depended on you. How much they escaped through you. How much they hid behind your presence to avoid facing their own reflection. But even that is only the surface. Because the moment denial collapses and control fails, they enter the most dangerous stage, the internal breakdown. And that's where the real story begins. When the mind can no longer hide behind denial, and all attempts at control fail, the real collapse begins. A collapse that doesn't happen in public, but in the silent corners of the inner world, where no one is watching and no one can interfere. This is the moment when the biggest question rises from the darkness. Who am I now? At first, they try to hold themselves together. They take deep breaths. They repeat empty lines like, "I'm fine. I'll get over this. Time will fix everything." But when night comes, and silence grows heavier, and the noise of life fades away, the truth appears without makeup. They are not fine. They never were. Because your distance didn't take a person away from their life. It took away the emotional support they were leaning on to avoid facing themselves. They always thought you were just a beautiful presence in their world. But the truth is much deeper. You were the space they escaped into, to avoid confronting the cracks inside their own soul. And that's when the tearing begins. The mind tries to protect its old image. The heart tries to reach for something that's no longer there. And awareness begins asking painful questions that cannot be silenced. Why do I feel so empty? Why is my spirit shaking like this? How did I believe I was strong when a single distance shook me to the core? This moment is the most dangerous stage of the entire journey, because for the first time, they are forced to see themselves without external mirrors. No presence to validate them. No voice to reassure them. No identity to borrow from someone else. And when the soul looks inward with no distractions, the pain transforms. From the pain of losing you, to the pain of meeting the self they've avoided for years. This pain is far more brutal, because it has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with an old fear, a buried wound, a hidden emptiness, a hollow identity built on attachment instead of awareness. And because the psyche is weak in front of its own truth, the mind starts searching for a new escape route. Not a path to healing, but a path to avoidance. And in that exact moment, the most dangerous door opens. The door of rewriting the story. To protect the ego. To cover the collapse. To justify the pain. To fabricate meaning. So, they never have to admit that they broke because you stepped away, not because you harmed them. And from here, the story takes an even darker turn. When the inner collapse becomes undeniable, the mind does what it has always done to survive. It creates a story. Not a true story, but a protective one. The mind starts collecting scenes from the past. Not honestly, but selectively. It amplifies a moment where you were cold, erases a moment where you were patient, magnifies a moment where you got angry, and buries 100 moments where you carried the weight in silence. And from these fragments, it builds a narrative that is emotionally useful, not truthful, not balanced, but useful for psychological survival. Because at this stage, the mind isn't searching for truth. It's searching for relief. Relief from shame, relief from responsibility, relief from the terrifying idea the problem was never you, but something broken inside them. So the narrative evolves. They hurt me. They abandoned me. They never cared. They were selfish. These lines aren't analysis. They are shields. Shields to protect the ego from collapsing completely. But then, something even more dangerous happens. The ego begins to assign meaning to the pain. Because pain without meaning is unbearable. So the mind invents meaning. Any meaning. Just to stay alive inside its own story. And now, they aren't just telling a story. They're believing it. But how long can a lie survive in front of reality? Not long. Because eventually, after the story has been repeated in their head a dozen times, after the blame has been projected onto you over and over, a crack appears in the narrative. A simple question slips in. What if the story I created isn't the truth? This question is poison to the ego, but medicine to the soul. And from that question, a new collapse begins. Not the collapse of losing you, but the collapse of losing the illusion that once protected them. And when that illusion falls, they are forced back into the one place they never wanted to return to, the truth. When every escape fails and every illusion collapses, the mind has no choice but to face the truth. Not the truth about you, but the truth about itself. This is where the real healing begins. It starts with uncomfortable admissions, that they were hiding behind others, that their worth was borrowed, not built, that they searched for someone else to give them the safety they never learned to create within, that they avoided the truth because the truth was more painful than the loss. These confessions don't come with tears on the outside. They fall inside the chest like stones. And with every confession, an illusion dies. And beneath each illusion, a wound appears that was waiting, for years, to be seen. For the first time, they begin to see their real injuries. The childhood wound, the wound of need, the wound of inadequacy, the wound of loneliness, the wound of pretending to be strong while collapsing in silence. And here, a powerful realization emerges. The pain didn't start when you left. The pain started long before you ever arrived. You were never the source of the wound. You were only the mirror that revealed it. And that realization is the beginning of rebirth. Because from here, the soul begins to rebuild. Not by clinging, but by rising. Not by attaching, but by becoming whole. The first step is reclaiming self-worth. Understanding that value is not earned through another's presence, but through the courage to face the self, to heal the self, to stand on your own feet without begging for emotional shelter. Then comes boundaries. Not as walls, but as clarity. Not to push others away, but to protect what is being rebuilt inside. Then comes inner reconstruction. Choosing peace over chaos. Choosing growth over dependency. Choosing relationships that add instead of relationships that consume. And in this stage, a new truth is born. Every ending exposes two versions of you. The version that was afraid, and the version that is ready to rise. With this awareness, the question changes. It's no longer, why did they leave me? But instead, who do I choose to become now? This is not a question of pain anymore. This is a question of rebirth. Because once the soul crosses all these stages, the fall, the struggle, The denial, the collapse, the confrontation, and the rebuilding. It finally reaches the last door. Freedom. Here, everything shifts. Pain becomes a teacher. The past becomes a lesson. And relationships become choices, not prisons. Here, a person stands whole, with awareness in one hand, peace in the other, and a spine that doesn't bend for fear, for emptiness, or for abandonment. Here, love becomes freedom, not addiction. Closeness becomes a gift, not a crutch. And distance stops being a threat, because the self is no longer afraid of itself. At this level, nothing breaks you. Not who leaves, not who stays, not who returns. Because the foundation is no longer outside. The foundation has finally been built within. And that is the ultimate peace. A peace that cannot be begged for, lost, or taken away. Distance was never the ending. Distance was the beginning of self-knowledge, self-power, and self-ownership. And so the journey of breaking on the outside becomes the journey of rising on the inside. Subscribe to the channel.